Hi, this is Robert Bevan and welcome to another Best Practice CD. What does the residential property consumer want from a real estate agency? Best Practice conducted research of residential sellers, buyers and investors, landlords, to find out what activities, habits and strategies which they like, dislike or find irritating when they deal with a real estate agency. And during this CD, I'm going to take you through those 30 activities. The CD comes with an accompanying workbook, and for best results, have the workbook next to you as you listen to the CD. I don't like to start a training program with a negative, but when we asked buyers, sellers and investors what they liked and disliked, the number one activity that came forward was the automated telephone system. Your call is important to us. All our operators are busy, or press 1 for sales, 2 for property management. They don't like it. Now, we all know the key to success in any business, irrespective of the profession or industry, the key to success is finding out what your clients like and giving it to them. Similarly, finding out what they don't like and making sure they don't get that is just as important. So if they don't like the automated telephone system, what is it that they do like? Well, they want the phone to be answered by a live person within 4 rings. The lesson is clear. If you can't have your phone answered within 4 rings, it's time to train up a backup receptionist. Number 3 in the list of 30 was that when buyers, sellers and investors talk to the real estate agency or somebody within the real estate agency, they're normally talking about a very expensive asset, a property. They consider the relationship that they have with the agency to be confidential and the matters discussed to be very private. So they take exception to a receptionist trying to dig into those things that they consider to be private. And a phrase such as, "What's it in regard to?" they dislike intensely. Now, you can ask the same question, it just needs to be phrased a little differently. So if you train your receptionist to use words such as, "May I tell name the nature of your inquiry?" they're not offended by that at all. So it's just a matter of style to get the training right for the receptionist so that the client is not put offside. The website, very, very important to all property consumers. The domain name, they want to get in touch with you and they want to see what you've got in your business. Wherever you have your domain name, www.nameofagency.com.au.co.nz, whatever the suffix is, your domain name is a driver of business to your agency. It's proactive. The telephone number is a reactive contact point. So it's important that you drive business to your agency. So wherever your telephone number appears, have your domain name, forget the www prefix, you don't need that, have your domain name appear 3 times the size of your telephone number. Remember, the domain name, it's a proactive driver of business, whereas the telephone is a reactive point of contact. Speed. When a property consumer goes onto your website these days, they are time poor. They want information and they want it quickly. They define quickly as when they go to your homepage for the first time, they want it to download within 10 seconds and they want all backup pages to download within 20 seconds. When property consumers go to a real estate agency's website, they go to look at one thing. They go to look at your listings, the stock on the shelf. When prospective sellers think of selling their property, they research their local marketplace for 19 days before they contact an agency. Most of that research is done via the internet and they look at all the local real estate agents' websites. When they go to the website, they go to one thing, one source document, one thing only, the listings, the stock you have on your shelf. And they want those listings to be fresh, informative, attractive, and up to date at all times. I mentioned earlier that they're time poor. When they go into an agency's website and look at a listing, they love the icon display. number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, and the parking displayed as an icon, something that they can gather information from quickly. Similarly, they like the bulletproof description. The days of employing an editor to put 3 adjectives in front of every bedroom are gone. Bullet point description, they want information and they want it quickly. The floor plan. They love the floor plan to be part of the listing, but not just the areas of the rooms. They want the total square area to be made clear so that they don't have to get out their calculator and multiply all of the dimensions to find out the total floor area of the unit or the house. Finally, when it comes to the agent's website, when they're scrolling down and they're looking at all of the information on the listing, should they decide they wish to make contact with the selling person, they want that person's email and mobile cell phone number to be on the listing. They don't want to have to go back to the agency's website, click on Our Team or Contact Us to try and find contact details for the agent. They want the agent's direct contact, email and mobile on the listing that they're interested in. We asked vendors how did they select their real estate agent, the person that they were very happy with, that achieved for them a great price and a reasonable selling period. And there were 3 things that came out constantly. Number 1, they wanted to deal with an agency with a strong local market presence, branding right throughout their core business area. And core business area is important. We asked them how important was it that it be an international brand. No, Australian and New Zealand home sellers were interested in market presence in that core business area, typically within the country, within 30 k's of their home, or within the city, within 5 to 8 k's of the home. So local market presence, very, very important. The second selection criterion was the reputation of the agency. They looked at an agency which could clearly demonstrate results, that's sales made regularly, often, and integrity. Interestingly here, in the country, the order was reversed. In the country, integrity came first. Often we would hear things such as, well, they sold Mum's house 10 years ago and they really did a good job, and we would go there to see them because they were great people. Integrity, very, very important, but in the city it was results first and integrity second. Country, integrity 1, results number 2. Both of them, of course, are very, very important. And the third criterion when it came to selecting an agent to market the properties for sale was their website. And when it got to the website, it was the listings and those things we went through just before discussing the vendor's selection process. Continuing on with the research of vendors, and here we look at them in 3 categories: past vendors, current vendors, or prospective vendors. It was very, very interesting to note that the vendor really was looking for a lifetime partnership. They didn't believe that the relationship they had with their local real estate agent would stop when they signed the agency agreement, or when they had an unconditional sale, or when settlement occurred. They thought that the nature of the relationship would vary from when they were a past client to a current client to a prospective client, but they still wanted to maintain a relationship. On page number 2 of your workbook, you'll see an example of a simple little questionnaire which is the start of a lifetime partnership. It's something that whenever somebody telephones an office and says, "Hi, my name is, we're thinking of selling, can we talk to a real estate salesperson?" bells go, monitored results are recorded as per the template provided on page number 2. The information that is collected is incredibly important. It goes into the database, and then that person is continued to be communicated with for as long as the agency is in business and they are in the neighbourhood, in your core business area. I just draw to your attention in the introductory question, so that we can meet your specific needs, will you allow us 2 to 3 minutes to obtain your thoughts on a few areas regarding your home? If you're conducting telephone research, and this is the permission to ask questions introduction, if you tell them that the questions will take 2 minutes, 90% of the time people will say, sure, go ahead. If you tell them it's going to take 3 minutes, 50-50 will be your response. If you tell them 4 minutes or more, only 10% will go ahead. So if you're conducting any research of this nature, it's important that you get the inquiry down to a maximum of 2 minutes and therefore maximise your strike rate. But the important thing is here, when somebody rings up and says, my name is, we're thinking of selling, can I speak to a sales agent? Alarm bells go off, key data is collected, the process is trained and rehearsed so that everyone knows, hey, all of that marketing that we're doing out there, all of that public relations that we're doing is aimed at having one thing occur, getting that call which says, hi, my name is, can I speak to a sales agent? And on page number 2, there's a template for you to use as the basis to write your own questions to be asked of that prospective client. On page number 3, there's a template which enables you to find out where your purchases are coming from. Now, this particular need comes from vendors. They want to deal with agents who have got purchases, and when they're discussing marketing programs, they want to know where your inquiry is coming from. Now, I can give you the Australasia-wide results of sales purchaser inquiry pursuant to that form on page number 3. And 61% of inquiry on average comes via the internet, 14% comes via newspaper display advertising, and 8% comes from for sale boards. That means a massive 83% of purchaser inquiry comes from just 3 sources. Now that's Australasia-wide information. It represents averages of a very, very large category. It's essential, according to vendors and their needs, that their local sales agent is able to tell them where the inquiry comes from in their area. And their area is typically 10,000 homes, a population of 30,000 people. It's so easy to find out. Use the template on page number 3. At the end of inquiries from prospective purchasers, the sales agent asks the question, where did you first learn about this property we have for sale? And you'll have your own local stats of purchaser inquiry. Once an agency agreement has been signed and the marketing has commenced, vendors are generally very, very happy for the first 14 days. But if after 14 days there's not a lot of action, there hasn't been an offer, or the open homes haven't been that well attended, they start to become a little bit concerned. Not concerned enough to say too much to the salesperson, but a bit concerned to say each other when the head hits the pillow that night, gee, I'm a bit concerned we haven't actually had any offers to date. When the salesperson rings up, they'll probably just go with the flow. But it's the little things that need to be picked up after the first 2 weeks. On page number 4 of the workbook, you'll see an example current vendor research script. This is something that the customer service manager or a third party uses to contact every vendor on day 15, the start of the 3rd week of the marketing program, to find out about the little things that they're concerned about. The little things start to occur at day 15. To make this a successful activity, it's not something that the salesperson or the owner of the agency or the sales manager can do. They're too close to the action. We need a third party, often called the customer service manager, to use the telephone and give the current vendor a call to find out the little things. The little things might be as simple as, look, when the signboard went up, we did mention that it's not straight. Well, it's not a big deal for the 14 days, but if there hasn't been an offer after 14 days, it starts to become more of an irritation to the vendor. The customer service manager making that telephone call on day 15 can remedy that concern, have it fixed up, and the relationship continues on in a positive note. According to current vendors, communication is essential. And there are 2 areas where it's very, very important and where many felt they were let down. The first is the period from signing the agency agreement to the first marketing activity. Generally only about 10 to 14 days. Yes, we all know the sales agent is very, very busy organising contracts and open for inspection times and photographs and advertising copy, etc. But the vendor doesn't know that. So during that 10 to 14 day period, give consideration to introducing 5 communication activities: a congratulations letter, a confirmation of the process letter, the things that will be happening immediately, information regarding the marketing program, another communication on how the open homes will work. But that 10 to 14 day agency period from the signing of the agreement to the first marketing activity, very, very important. Communication. Also on communication, point number 16 is the period from the unconditional sale to settlement. Normally throughout New Zealand and Australia, a period of between 4 and 6 weeks. Many vendors, and they're basically now past vendors, expressed the concern that once the contract had been exchanged or went unconditional, they didn't hear from the salesperson again. And they made comments such as, do you know, they told us they were interested in a relationship for life. They told us they really cared. Do you know, they only cared about one thing. That was the commission, because as soon as they got an unconditional sale, the communication stopped. Well, that's not good enough, because you are looking to have real clients for life. Once you get an unconditional sale, they just go into a different communication category. During that 4 to 6 week period, introduce 5 communication processes, 1 a week: a congratulations letter, a confirmation of the process letter, some tips on moving home, some tips on packing, the sorts of things that exist probably on your website right now, but bring it in as administrative policy that these things always happen, so that you meet the need to communicate with vendors who have moved into that unconditional sale to settlement period. I'd like to move now into the property investors, the landlords. 83% of your property investors, the owners for whom you manage property, own just one property, and they are unsophisticated investors. Most of them are baby boomers. Number 1 on their list of likes, dislikes and irritations was that they like to deal with one property manager only. Now, I'm aware of the research we've done elsewhere on financial modelling within best practice of property management departments, that task management and portfolio management systems can both be run effectively and profitably. But when you're deciding which type of management system to introduce into your property management department, be aware that one of the great needs of most residential investors, landlords, is to deal with just one property manager who has information, has an awareness of the vacancies, the arrears, the major repairs, etc. So one property manager only to deal with was a big need of the typical unsophisticated investor, 83% of whom own just one property only. Also, I mentioned earlier that most of them are baby boomers. Baby boomers who are unsophisticated investors, when there is a vacancy, when there are arrears, or when there are major repairs, they want to talk to the property manager and they want to have a discussion. They do not like receiving an email, or worse still, a text message just advising of the problem and asking for instructions. So if there's a vacancy, arrears or major repairs, pick up the telephone and have a discussion. And number 19 of the activities that they made comment on was they want a recommendation. They only own one property, most of them. They don't deal with the problems that come up in the residential tenancy area all that often. That's why they've appointed an agent to be their expert. So whenever there is a problem, they want to have a discussion and they want the property manager to make a recommendation. Number 20, the annual market rent review. They would like once a year Just a 1 or 2 sentence letter which advises that the current market rental value is, so that they can keep track that their rents are going in the right direction. They're always interested in the yield, in the rental return. So once a year they'd like just confirmation as to what the market rent might be. Now, of course, that will often lead on to, if rents have increased, a discussion as to whether or not the rent should be increased. Number 21, they're not just interested in the yield of the property, the rent that they receive, they're also interested in the capital appreciation. It was the main reason that the majority of property investors, landlords, purchased the property in the first place. Having regard to that, they would like a 1 or 2 sentence letter once every 2 years, which tells them the current reasonable selling price of the property. Not hard to do, requires cooperation between the sales department and the property management department, but one of the major needs of residential investors. Another thing we learned from experienced investors is point number 22, market rent. They want to optimise the rents that they get from their properties, and they've learned not to take the advice which many inexperienced property managers give, which is the property is worth $400 a week, but let's try for $425. Experienced investors say, no, let's not do that. If we try for that, we're going to end up with a higher vacancy rate. We're going to end up accepting a tenant with poorer references, and that's going to impact on our arrears factor and also on our repairs and maintenance factor. So let's keep the rents just below market value, about 95% of market value. Keep it there. That way we'll always attract the best reference tenants, and that minimises our arrears, our vacancy and our repairs and maintenance factors. Another great policy from experienced investors was the 10% a day 10 vacancy rule. They told us that if the property is well presented and is well marketed, you know where you should be looking to find tenants. If it's well presented and well marketed, if it has been vacant for 10 days, it's time to reduce the asking rent by 10%. Now again here, well-intentioned, but inexperienced property or leasing managers will often give the landlord a call and say, look, the property has been vacant for 10 days. We've been asking $400 a week. The landlord will say, what do you think we should do? And the inexperienced sales property manager will say, let's give it another 10 days. The experienced investor says, no, let's not do that. If we've been asking $400 a week, and it's been vacant for 10 days, that means we've lost $570. The next step is not to lose another $570, it's to reduce the rent by 10%. And that comes from experienced investors. Number 24, they are just that, investors, and they are interested in other investment properties for sale. Now, curiously, even the baby boomers who want to have a telephone discussion when there's vacancy, arrears or major repairs are quite happy to receive via email information on properties that the agency considers to represent good potential as an investment. After all, the hardest decision they made was to buy their first investment property. So they need to be treated as investors. They need to go into your database as prospective investors. Forget landlords, call them prospective investors and provide them with information of properties which you believe represent good potential for long-term investment success. They also want to know where their tenants come from. They want to make sure that wherever it is you're seeking to find tenants, that's where your local tenancy inquiry comes from. If you go back to page number 3, item number 13 in your workbook, you will see the form that we discussed earlier, which dealt with where purchases come from. The same form is used to find out where tenants come from, prospective tenants. A massive 91% of tenants throughout New Zealand and Australia come from just 2 sources. 71% via the internet and 20% are walk-in rental list inquiry. Now again, they are averages right across Australasia. Do your own research using that template on page number 3 of the accompanying workbook. A reason that many of the investors gave us for the fact that they only owned one property, well, we said, didn't you intend to buy a second or a third? And they said, well, we did, but every time we hear from the property manager, it's always bad news. They only ring up when there's a problem. Well, it's not quite right, because all property managers send out a statement either in the post or via email 12 times a year, generally once a month. And for the overwhelming majority, and we're talking 95% plus of those landlord investors, it is good news. The rent's paid, there's no repairs, everything is looking rosy, but we don't point that out to them. So you might like to give consideration to 3 times a year to just placing a little note, maybe a yellow post-it note on the statement, or a printed note on your email statement which says, great to see rent paid in advance as usual, or gardens and lawns well maintained as always, or the property is in excellent order and condition, no repairs or maintenance items necessary. Some good news, so that when they see the statement, 95% of them, a smile comes on the face and they start to think about investing in residential property in a positive light, and so we can reduce that statistic, 83% of your landlords only owning one property. Another interesting fact that has been coming up over many, many years, just the names that we use for them and for us. Landlords, they don't like the term landlord. They consider a landlord to be an obese, medieval baron standing on a parapet, tipping hot oil onto the serfs down below. What do they want to be called? Property investors or property owners. So get rid of the landlords files, the landlords section of your database, and turn it into property investors, and turn all of your property investors into prospective purchasers, not prospective sellers. What about the term property manager? Well, there's been a tendency in some parts of Australia and New Zealand to call the property manager the asset manager. We asked them what they thought of that term. They didn't understand it. Didn't have any idea what an asset manager was. Thought it was something to do with a superannuation fund or some type of stock exchange role. So what do you want the property manager to be called? Just that, a property manager. Communication. Boomers like to talk. They like the telephone. The overwhelming majority of current landlords, investors, are boomers. Generation X, though, is starting to come into the investment market, and they would rather communicate via email. When we get to Gen Y, and we don't have too many Gen Ys investing in real estate just yet, they like to SMS, to text, and to use social media. But you need to be aware of the way your various clients wish to be communicated with. So if you're dealing with a boomer, it's the phone. If it's Gen X, it's email, and Gen Y, text and social media. We also ask them how much time do they think is reasonable before they have a telephone call or an email replied to by their real estate agency. Most research that I've looked at or read on this area comes out of the United States of America, and most of that research says that clients or prospective clients want an instant response. Well, we've checked this throughout New Zealand and Australia, and our clients, our property consumers, are not as tough as that. They expect a reply to their email within 4 business hours or a telephone call within 2 business hours. Now, of course, all of these areas you can test yourself. Within best practice, we have focus group guidelines, and that's where this research has come from, but it's come from throughout Australia and New Zealand. So I strongly recommend you get a copy, if you subscribe to best practice, of how to run a focus group. Send best practice an email and we'll provide you with those guidelines, and then you can do your own research in your own 10,000 homes, 30,000 population to find out what are the needs and wants, the things that your own consumers like and dislike. What do they find irritating? Finally, confidentiality. It came across time and time and time again. When vendors, purchasers, property investors are talking to a real estate agency, they're talking about a significant financial asset. The discussions that they have, the information they provide, they consider to be very, very confidential, and they expect the privacy to be respected with that relationship. So there you have it, the 30 activities, habits and strategies which Australian and New Zealand property sellers, buyers and investors, landlords, advise they like, dislike or find irritating when dealing with a residential real estate agency. May I suggest that you take the workbook, have a listen to the CD again and compare the needs and wants isolated through these 30 habits and activities, and compare them to the strategies, the policies within your own agency, and see if there's any improvement that you can make to the way you deal with your current property consumers. If in doubt, remember the advice I gave earlier, get a hold of the focus group guidelines and conduct research of your own local sellers, buyers and investors so that you are absolutely clear on what they like and dislike. Thank you very much for listening to another Best Practice CD, and remember, you always pick up more when you listen to it a second and a third time.